Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains. I'm Paul Everett, PyCharm Developer Advocate. I'll be your host for today's webinar on smarter fast API through tooling. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. We're joined today by Sebastián Ramírez, someone with a lot of years of fast API experience. I make that joke because he got a tweet from a recruiter asking for 4 years of fast API experience. It was 2 years old. Sebastián is the creator of Fast API, creator of Typer, creator of SQL Model, senior software engineer at Forethought. I think the keynote speaker at every Python conference for the last 6 months. A genuinely wonderful and kind person. Welcome, Sebastián.
Thank you very much. That was such an introduction. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, PyCharm and JetBrains, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's going to be a pleasure for us as we crank through this. But wait, Paul, you may say, there's another face on the screen. We're also joined by Alexey Knyazov, PyCharm core developer, creator of our recent, and by recent, I mean recent, Fast API support, along with the Endpoints integration that we're going to be showing today. Smart, nice, funny. Welcome, Alexey.
Hi, everyone. Sebastián, nice to have you here.
By the way, everyone, Alexey has a job today to keep me out of the ditch, both on correcting my mistakes, but also telling me faster, slower, whatever it is. Let's do some framing. Sebastián, this webinar is focused on the word smarter. This morning, I was rereading a Real Python interview with you. I recommend that everyone go and read that. It's really good. Where you discussed your experience kind of as a front-end developer, the developer experience over in that side of the world with TypeScript and all these kinds of things, and how you wanted things to be in Python back-end development, full-stack development, whatever you want to call it. Can you explain that idea a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, through the years, I got the chance to work in a bunch of different projects, very strange and diverse, with Python and with some front-end JavaScript, TypeScript, even Electron apps and stuff like that, and a bunch of data science and data processing and machine learning, whatever. The thing is that seeing all these languages and all the features that they provide, I got the chance to realize that the type annotations in whatever the language it is are the thing that provides auto-completion. And I love auto-completion. I live for auto-completion. Like that's one of the main things I use to select the technologies that I use or the ones that I built. Is just like to get auto-completion as much as I can. And also inline errors in the editor. Funny thing is that the funny thing is that these type annotations and this support provided by editors is normally called static analysis and things like that. That sounds super sophisticated and like this is only for like, I don't know, very, very, very important computer scientists somewhere else. And it actually refers to the auto-completion and the inline errors that I really, really like. So I wanted to bring all that developer experience to Python. I wanted to be able to have that, but there was not an easy way. And then Python 3.6 came with type annotations for Python, allowing us to have these optional type annotations. And we don't even need to compile Python, like we have to compile TypeScript to JavaScript or something like that. It's just like the same Python, but it has support for these type annotations. And then suddenly we can get this great editor support everywhere. And that was the idea, to get these type annotations and bring them up a notch to have a lot of extra features on top of just of the support that we could have from the editors. Also have data validation, data documentation, serialization, and everything based on standards and all that stuff. So that's what I wanted to have in Python and import those features and that developer experience from other areas as well.
I'm totally with you on that. My other day job is WebStorm Developer Advocate. And so I make these courses and things about fail faster because the TypeScript experience and the frameworks that embrace it will red squiggly you immediately as soon as you make a mistake. Alexey, for developer experience, DX, I view it as two sides of a handshake. On one side, the language and the frameworks need to provide some structure to the tooling. And then on the other side, the tooling needs to take that structure and then make the development experience better. Does that sound right? And is it static analysis? I mean, you know, type hints, et cetera. Is that the way it happens?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Actually, Sebastian said it best. Type hints are what gives you auto-completion. That's just perfect. So, I mean, as the creators of tools like PyCharm, we will try to provide the developer experience. But if, and we don't do anything magical, by the way, we basically read in the source code and giving you all the help we can give. But to do that, we have to understand the code. And by virtue of Python being very dynamic language, it's possible to do a lot of things in a way that's really hard to understand statically without running this code. But when you have a lot of type annotations and structure in the framework itself, it makes my job so much easy. So I'm on board.
I mean, specifically on that point, for the previous generations of frameworks that we kind of provide deep support for, Django, Flask, Pyramid, et cetera, in many cases, you have to go look for like magic variable names, and you have to teach our tool all the weird runtimey things, which limits the number of tools you can support. And so with FastAPI, I don't think it was that big of a leap for you, right?
I wouldn't even call it a leap. So even before we added any support for FastAPI, you could use it in PyCharm, and the support already was pretty good. And that all thanks to Sebastian and the extensive type hinting in the library itself.
And Sebastian, I think you've written and said repeatedly that was your goal: do things using the standards so that, you know, if it's PyCharm or VS Code or MyPy or any of these other things, they're just going to be able to work.
Yeah, in fact, when I was building FastAPI, before I wrote any of the internal code, like it was a long process and a bunch of understanding standards and adding pull requests to the supporting libraries and things like that. But when I was about to write the actual internal code of FastAPI, before writing anything, I wrote how I wanted it to interact, like how I wanted it to feel working with it in PyCharm and Visual Studio Code, like, and in the main editors. I wanted to have the best support possible before even writing any of the core actual code. So I first fixed the design of how to use it and how I wanted the developer experience to be, and making sure that it will work great in the main editors, in PyCharm, Visual Studio Code, and the other ones based on Jedi. And then after I knew that it will work great in all of them, I then wrote the code to read and to use all the information that I had decided to put in that like sort of API for the developers.
As someone, my side project for the last 2 years has been trying to replace templating with kind of component driven development to get that same experience. Totally agree with you. It really makes a big difference. So with all this setup done, let's now get on with the slides. So switch back over to my slides view. All right. As we go through this, there's going to be questions that get asked. And as you have these questions, go ahead and ask them. Don't wait until the end. Over here in the chat window for YouTube, we've got some of the PyCharm folks. We've got Alexei. We got Sebastian. Sometimes you'll see me turning my head, looking over. And what we'll do is we'll take some of the questions and gather them up and go over them during little breaks in the demonstration. But some of them we're just going to answer immediately. I make a joke. Always the first question is this being recorded? I've given 1 trillion webinars, and 1,000,000,000,000+ times someone asks this question, usually 5 minutes after I say these words. So yes, this is being recorded. It'll be available essentially immediately because this is YouTube, and we will also announce it over on our blog. All right. We also have some material that this is based on. This demo is based on the SQL model tutorial. I've got a link. Actually, let me get out of this and bring over my window. The other one. I meant to put this in the slides and I didn't get them in time. At this URL, which Alexei will paste into chat, are all of the demo notes that I have for today's demo that you can follow along, and it's got working code at each step. This is based on a tutorial that Sebastian wrote for SQL Model. Fantastic tutorial. So if you go to the SQL Model website for the docs and go to tutorial, you can walk through all of this, in particular, the part at the end about FastAPI and Pydantic. Now, I've also adopted this a little bit from Michael Kennedy's Talk Python course, and he's got a course on modern APIs with FastAPI. Wonderful course, a lot of material in it, and I took some of the ideas from it and put it into how I present this material here. And then one other thing, look for maybe the end of November, the beginning of December on the PyCharm guide site. Mukul Mantosh, who's been doing incredible video demo courses for us. He's working on one to do AWS and FastAPI and Kubernetes. Oh my goodness, the amount of work he's doing to pre-chew your food for you when this thing comes out, it's going to be absolutely amazing. I've been working with him each week on all of his checkpoints along the way. So that's the material that we've got in place for this. Let's go ahead and start. I will move this back off the screen. And then you can go back into presentation mode. And I will slide you over to here. Good. Okay. With this in mind, yes, we are. Nope, I didn't want to. I clicked one click too many. The difference between a swipe and a click. All right, we're back. And let me get my instructions set up over here. All right, I'm going to begin in that link that Alexei pasted in there. I'm going to begin on make a project. And what we're going to start, we're going to start at the very beginning. We're going to show stuff that was just added in the latest EAP for FastAPI. And as we go along, I'm going to stop occasionally, and we're going to talk about the word smarter, this handshake between a framework that provides structure, usually via type hinting and static analysis. And then on the other side, a tool, in this case, PyCharm, but we might also look at MyPy, that takes advantage of that and can tell you and help you and give you coding assistance. So I'm going to start on the welcome to PyCharm screen. For the record, I'm using the purple theme for the very first time. I've always done light theme. And I have to look over and say, why aren't you using a dark theme? So I'm using a dark theme. So you'll have to accept that. I also have my IDE set up in a minimalist way without tabs and stuff like that. So I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to say that this is a FastAPI project. Alexei added this, I think, in the previous EAP. Some of the stuff you're going to see is from the most recent EAP. One of the things that you're going to see from the most recent EAP is this. We now bundled the poetry plugin. We had collaborated with Kudai and Anno and now moved it into the open source repository for PyCharm. So this is going to be a sample project for FastAPI based on poetry. And I'll go ahead and kick it off. The choice of poetry is kind of interesting. It's a little bit bleeding edge, but it's getting so much response from the PyCharm community. So I thought I'd go ahead and do it for this demo. Sebastian, how much poetry are you seeing?
I would recommend poetry. For new projects, I will use poetry. In fact, SQL Model uses the alpha version of the newest thing with poetry, and I will use poetry for any any new projects. I'm not using Poetry for FastAPI and the Typer because I started with something else, but I will just go ahead with Poetry.
All right, I dragged this over because I'm in a multi-monitor setup. All right, and so what the project is doing is it's creating a poetry, it's creating a new PyCharm project with a poetry interpreter and some sample code in it that lets you, goes ahead and makes a pyproject.toml file that has the dependencies. It's going and getting the dependencies and has some sample code in it, a sample project. It's going to have a run configuration, various kinds of things. So I don't know why it's not just using, maybe there was a new unicorn since this morning. I don't know, but it's not using the cache version. So this is taking a little bit longer. Sebastian, as things like FastAPI get adopted, we talked about smarter and talked about better tooling. One of the things that happened in the front end world was JSX and components just got so big that everyone had to do really good support for it. And so FastAPI is becoming really big. Maybe it's having a similar effect that the tooling has to give a good experience for it. Do you buy that?
One of the things is that FastAPI was optimized for the best developer experience, but on the other side, FastAPI is uses all the main standards and the typing standards and tries to take advantage of all these standards and not use anything that is very dynamic or strange. Right. And the good thing is that as I keep using more the standard type annotations, and for example, PyCharm gets on board and add support for new type annotation features and the other editors as well, then these editors like PyCharm and other editors end up supporting more just general Python and the standard Python. And that's amazing because it's something that is not only for FastAPI, but benefits any other Python project that is just using standard
Indeed.
types. So I think that's amazing. I don't know, that as you were saying, that partnership between tools and code bases through the standards is awesome.
I'm going to follow up with you about that and get the two of you to talk about pyproject.toml as a convenient place to park the port number. But we'll get to that. Okay, what do we have? We have a FastAPI project with a main.py, and it made a poetry environment for me based on 3.9.7, which was what I had as my default. And it created a run configuration. What does this mean? Part of our support for a particular project is to go ahead and create out of the box run configurations for things like Django, things like Flask, and now for FastAPI. And one of the things is it seems to be pretty much settled that the developer experience is going to be Unicorn. So Alexei went ahead and wired up Unicorn support. And you don't even have to point at the Unicorn executable. You just say, what is your main.py? And then it will do the Unicorn for you in the background. A couple of other things like an option here and a link to go see some more things. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And we're going to bring up the command that's run. And Alexei, you're going to talk a little bit about what we discussed yesterday with the sniffing at the app. So this is the command that was actually run. And if you look in here, we don't import Unicorn. We don't have a main down here that launches Unicorn or anything like that. How do we know what is app?
Well, that's the static analysis you talked about before. So if we know where to look, we know what to look for, we can find it. So if you just point us to the file you're using for your FastAPI project, we'll find the name of your app and put it in for you. So no need to.
Right. I mean, we didn't put what is the name of your app here. We discovered it by looking in main.py for something that had a type of FastAPI. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's so cool. So it's not faced to the name of the variable, but it's actually checking the actual class, the actual instance. That's very cool.
Okay.
You can name it anything you like.
I freaking love this. my previous webinar with Will McGugan, we had a little bit of an argument about convention over configuration. And I just dislike magically named symbols. I prefer structure, and he actually does a good job in textual of going and sniffing at types to know which things are reactive, for example, rather than prefixing the name with a reactive under whatever. So that worked well. We've got it launched. And what we're launching is Unicorn. That is an ASGI server, which I'll get Sebastian to explain what those are and how standards like that help support this story about the handshake and plugging things together. Sebastian.
Sure. So let's start with the roots. The main thing that you could have heard about before this ASGI or ASGI standard will be WSGI or WSGI.
I'll type that.
Thank you. So this WSGI standard, this is actually part of the Python standards. It was the standard that was made a long time ago to define how a server will communicate with an application. And then when you say like a server and application, like what is the difference between those things? Like what does that mean? It normally means that you have a server on one side is one application, one binary, one program. It will be, for example, Unicorn or something like that. This program will be able to connect to a port in some machine, and this program will be able to speak the HTTP language and to understand it. And then this program will convert what is all that communication and will convert that to some dictionary saying like, hey, someone is asking for this path and is sending this data. And it will put that dictionary inside of some function. And now that function that will receive the dictionary, that function is provided by the application. That's all the difference between the WSGI server and the WSGI application. The server will normally be Unicorn. The application would normally be an instance of Django or an instance of Flask or something like that. So that's WSGI. Then when Python came with async and await, and we suddenly had all these additional features and advantages in terms of concurrency and throughput, and we can have very powerful servers that can have performance in terms of throughput on par with Golang or Node.js or things like that. Then this standard that was depending on functions calling our stuff was not enough for these async and await things. So there was this new standard, ASGI, which is just the same thing, but using async and await. And then it just creates a dictionary with the data from the HTTP request and a couple of functions that are passed to the application. And now the application will be something like FastAPI or other frameworks. And these applications will use those async functions to receive the data and to send the data. And that's the whole point. This means that you can use Unicorn with other ASGI applications, and you can use other server programs with FastAPI as well. So you can mix and match that.
For example, Hypercorn has HTTP3 support.
Exactly. So there are different tools that you can use for that.
Yep. I'll go ahead and open this in a browser. I'll click on this link and open it. And we see the message from going to / the message is basically message. Look at that. So it's returning a dictionary, and on your side in Sebastian, in FastAPI, you set the application JSON MIME type and blah, 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 and do all the right things. But there's also this other aspect I want you to explain, which is Open API integration. Can you explain what that is a little bit? Just keep it really short, and how it's part of this. If we adopt standards, we can have smarter tool chains.
Yep. So this ASGI thing is the standard for communicating with the application and the server. Now, FastAPI is built on top of standards. This is another standard that is called OpenAPI, which is to define how an API works. It's just the end result is just a JSON file that has all the paths that are available with all the data shapes that it will receive or return. And then OpenAPI is also integrated with a bunch of tools. This web user interface that is documenting the API that we have here is generated by a tool called Swagger UI. Swagger UI has no idea about FastAPI, but it knows OpenAPI. and because FastAPI is based on top of OpenAPI and is built around OpenAPI, then we can have this automatic integration with Swagger UI, which means that in the end, you write code using just standard type annotations, and you declare the data shapes with standard type annotations, and FastAPI generates this, provides you this automatic API documentation.
It's really fascinating that this much code can generate enough information in its structure to drive OpenAPI documentation of your project. So let's do a little bit of discussion and then hurry on to the next part. Discussions about PyProject.toml. Sebastian, do you have any plans to put any configuration knobs into PyProject.toml?
Not for FastAPI for now, because there are not many things to be configured in FastAPI, but it's very easy to write some code that will read from PyProject.toml and then pass those configurations to FastAPI. But it's not something that I want to have integrated by default in FastAPI. I would rather explain how to do it than to have some custom logic and to explain how to use FastAPI. Instead, just I prefer to explain how to use the normal tools.
All right, let's go on to the next step. And this is where I get on my soapbox a little bit. I've got a big tutorial about front-end development, where you traditionally write some React code, you go over to the browser, hit reload, or maybe it's already reload, but you click, open console log, go back over to your tool, forgot where you were and what you were doing, repeat. So I like staying in your tool, your smart editor, your IDE, and not leaving to go to the terminal to run stuff and the browser to look at stuff. Instead, use tests to consume the results of your work. Not because I want you to eat your vegetables. I'm a test-first developer, not test-driven developer. Not that interested in quality. I just want more joy. And doing my development in tests keep me in the flow, help me to fail faster, makes things more joyful. Reloading Chrome does not spark joy. So let's show a little bit about how this structure can help us switch over to that test first approach. One of the very first things is what Alexei has done for us. He's generated something called a .http file. What is this? If I created a new file, it would be one of the file types that we could create. .http. This is Postman in a file. That's the way you should think of it. And you can put it under version control, and you can do autocomplete and all those other things. And I can walk up to this and I can say, all right, run all the tests, 2 of them. Or I can walk up to one of them and run just one of them. And it's going to issue these requests and show me some stuff about the output. And I could click on one of these things if I wanted to open the JSON result. And so that's a really cool way of working, staying in this. But what if PyCharm Professional included something called Endpoints support in the most recent EAP, where on the consumer side, we knew the structure of the back end, and we could do things like that.
Nice.
So I can autocomplete and I can type user, etc. Lexi, I'll pause there real quick and let you talk briefly about endpoints and what we're trying to do with structure and smarter.
Yeah. So basically, when you have frameworks like FastAPI that tend to operate not only with source code, but with some type of endpoints, be that URLs, for example, we need some form of navigation for those and some smart assistance for URLs as well. We can't operate just by function names, for example, because they become irrelevant in that context. So we did this thing as we read what you put in your FastAPI project, extract the URLs from there, and then think about where we can provide the support for this. So basically, HTTP file is just one example of this. You can have completion for all your URLs. You can have navigation and some other useful things.
For example, I could move my configuration values to a separate file called an environment. And in here, I know that I've got a name, so it's going to supply that. I'd already typed a little bit of it. And if I'm on the other side, I can get a little bit of help from structure by saying refactor, rename, and maybe I just want the first name.
Not the name, Paul.
Here?
No, I think you meant to go for hello.
Okay, sorry. So if I want to refactor this and say rename to howdy, you mean this?
Yes.
All right, great. And so then if I'm on the other side, I see I get the refactor rename there. On this side, and we're still working on all the places the structures happen, this symbol appears here and here and here. If I change my mind and I want to call this first name, it will change all three of those. If I change my mind, like, damn, that was dumb, I can just undo the editor transaction. It'll go and find everywhere in my project that was affected by that refactoring and undo it. And the thing that's kind of interesting to me about this is we were talking about Sebastian's kind of view about better developer experience through structure, through type hinting. This isn't a type hint, but we were able to teach it to be indexed as if it was providing structures and symbols and things like that. And once we do that, we're off to the races on what we can do. What smart tools can do. You can get autocomplete. You can get red squigglies. You can get refactor renames. You can do navigation forwards and backwards. Find all the usages of something. So for example, if I want to find all the usages of this, I can just click on it and it's in the middle of a string. That's not a symbol. Wrong. We found it. It's a symbol to us. And we can look through all the places in the code where something appears.
Nice, that's super cool, because this is one of the places that really don't have a way to have like a standard from Python. Like this has to be deep integration with the editor. That's super cool.
It is, and we would like you over there in chat. Ricky Tichy just said, "Dang, that's cool as heck." Yes, Ricky Tichy, that's cool as heck. And Alexei's like 2 weeks into this. So if you've got any ideas out there about how to spend Alexei's time, reach out to him maybe in chat or bug him somewhere else. What can we do with this structure? What weird new ideas like endpoints can we do with this structure to put it to work? Okay, I'll speed up a little bit. It was kind of a drag to have to go look through the entire response. I'd like to be warned if the response wasn't the right thing. So in this case, it'll be the right thing because it's a 200. Oh, I did the wrong one. I wanted to run this. I'll run just this one. Okay, so that worked well. It's 200, but what if it was 300? I'll run it again. And in this case, my test is marked as failing. And if I ran all the tests, you'd see it a little bit better. I'll do that. If I run all the tests, you'll see that one passed, one failed. And then this can just be a really simple way to avoid going to the browser, writing little assert-like things in a Postman style language, but you're still in the IDE, so we can help you with autocomplete and things like that. Lex, anything you want to add to that?
No. So far, so good.
Alexei's added some things to improve developer experience. I won't show them just yet, but for example, these intentions, to write one of those things in the HTTP file for you and go ahead and generate some of the boilerplate, or go ahead and open it in a web browser if you want to punt out of the IDE. So we're working on some ways to put all this stuff to work. Okay, over to test first development. And I'm going to really emphasize test first development by stopping the server. Not only do I not need Chrome, I don't even need FastAPI server. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to install, I'll do it from the command line. I'm going to install via Poetry PyTest. And it's going to go off and start doing its thing. I'm going to make a new folder for tests, but what I'll actually do is make a file for comp test, since we're going to want that in a little bit. And once I have PyTest installed, how can I work smarter using the structure, stuff like that? I can walk up to one of my endpoints and I can navigate to the test for this. But wait, there's no test for this. Well, can you create a test for me? Name the file test under main and make a new function called test under root. Oop. I didn't give it enough time to realize that PyTest was installed. So integrated, I need to say auto detect PyTest. No PyTest runner fix. I installed it. Lexi, did you see where I might have gotten that wrong?
Not really.
Let me go back to my terminal.
I think Poetry is still installing PyTest.
It was probably still installing by the
okay.
moment,
Yes, I see down here. Yep, you're right. So I'll give that a little bit of time to keep going. And what I'm going to do is, instead of, I like to do tests. And so what I do is I split my screen. I don't do tabs. I split my screen. And on one side, I do my code that I'm testing. And on the other side, the test code. And then at the bottom, I'll have the test output. Yeah, that's what was happening. Poetry, love you, but your resolver. There we go. All right. Okay, you can keep going. And what I can do is walk up to one of these, generate a test, tell it to put it in there, and it writes a test for me, and I'll go ahead and run this failing test. Actually, what I'll do is I'll run everything in the tests folder, just in case I add some tests later. And my tests are going to fail, because false is false. And what I like to do is put these on autopilot. So I'm going to say, go ahead and run whenever anything changes. And I would like to wait 2 seconds. And you don't actually have to save. We know when things have changed. So if I come up here, run it one more time so that the auto delay kicks in. So it's run. And if I'm like, oh yeah, true, false is not true, I didn't save it. 2 seconds later, it reran and passed. So great. Now I need to write a test that is unique to the FastAPI way of testing. Newsflash, Sebastian's docs are so freaking good. Not just for SQL model, but for FastAPI. He explains this really well. He uses test client from Starlet. So I'm going to write client equal test client autocomplete the app, and autocomplete that from main. So now that I've got a client, I can do just the shallowest little test. I'm going to say response equals client.get and slash. And I look and I'm like, okay, response says it's any. That's not the right thing. What's going wrong here? It's because, it gives us a little hint on that. It's because I haven't installed requests. Test client depends on requests behind the scenes to give you the API for this. So once it's installed, I guess I should not trust that it will be fast. Yep. Once it's installed, then I get the autocomplete. All right, good. And we now know that response is a response. And I can say, great, did it work? I want to assert that response dot status code. Hands up, wait a couple of seconds, test run. Test pass. Okay, great. I guess if I wanted to, I could also assert that the JSON was correct. So assert response.json, and it's got something called name in it. And it's going to be, all right. And I'll wait a second for the test to run. Test failed. Why did they fail? Let's go back to test root. And it doesn't have name, it's message. I'm going to pretend I did that on purpose because I have a complaint, Sebastian. And actually, I have a complaint for both of you on the handshake. It's not actually your fault. It's going to be request's fault. But this is returning a dict. And later on, if we have time, we're going to do response model and stuff like that. And we'll know that it's a list of heroes or something like that. But I can't really write my test to assert that because it's going to be a dict. I'm going to lose all the information about the actual function. It would be cool if the response, in addition to JSON, had the equivalent of assert response.model, something like that. 0.message, or in this case, response.model.message. I would love to have fail faster, schema structure, autocomplete, red squiggles when writing my tests. What do you think?
That's an interesting idea. The thing that I see is that there is not going to be a way to add the type annotations for the response object given only the path, the root path, the string. But still, like, yeah, it's a very interesting idea, and it's similar and close to some things that I have been thinking about how to write automatic clients with autocompletion. But yeah,
right. I might have to do something that's like this, and manually put the annotation on it because we can't transport it back. But it would still be nice to get the actual result of the function rather than the wrapped JSONified thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. The other thing is that I like the idea of just having the very pure JSON result that is actually not completely dependent on FastAPI. It's just like the same. It's very similar to testing any other API in any other framework that is just a dictionary. But yeah, that's interesting to explore.
Yeah, it's nice because you can have CI on your tests that tell you if you violated the contract of the structure on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alexei, do you want to talk at all about code inference on these kinds of things?
Well, most of the code inference is done via the type annotations. We will try to infer something if type annotations are missing, but they are a great help. So if when talking about what you mean, if that entirely depends on the library. If Sebastian decides that that's something he wants to implement, we'll implement as well.
It would be interesting to see how we could transport that information. We're probably not going to get to it today, but you mark these with an attribute called response model that tells consumers of this, what is the type information of the thing that's being returned. It would be cool if we could transport that somehow.
You know, this is also closely related to something that I have been thinking about, finding a way to write automatically generated clients that communicate with FastAPI. And there are several tools. But now with the new standards for declaring type annotations for dictionaries, then it's going to be a lot easier to, for example, declare the request to send to the server. And just instead of having to import some model from somewhere and create an instance, if we can just declare the dictionary and have editor support for that particular dictionary from the auto-generated client, that's going to be amazing. But yeah, I don't know. That's for the future plans.
Sure. So I'll finish this off. And Alexei, if you could look back through chat and see if you see any questions or topics that we should discuss while I finish this. I wrote a live template called FAT for Fast API Test, and I can just fill in the blanks and say hello, get a hello from someone, get /hello/user. And I want to check that the results message equals hello user. And I kind of wrote this in MyPy compatible tests where they want you to put all the response things and stuff like that. Let's see what my failure was. So say hello failed because client isn't available. That's actually for the next, for the SQL model part of it. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second, and we will talk a little bit more. Actually, no, I'm gonna go on to endpoints, and we'll talk a little bit more, see how we're doing on time. One of the bigger things that Alexei did to help us with all of our work on endpoints is because I changed the name of this to Howdy. See, this is why we write tests, everybody. We have a new tool called Endpoints. Let's see. Alexei, where would my tool be?
That's a good question. Can you see the window? Huh.
All right, I think this is related to the way I opened it in the background and canceled something on the way up. So we'll skip that part. As we express these things on either side of the handshake, we have a chance for MyPy to get involved. And I know, Sebastian, this has been a big deal for you. Come on. Terminal. Yeah. A big deal for you trying to make structures that survive the MyPy gauntlet, because sometimes things that should work don't, and things that shouldn't work do. And in fact, you helped champion one of the big things about deferred annotations. I think you also championed a big thing about about alternate data classes being treated as data classes. Let's run MyPy on FastAPI code, see how Sebastian did. I'm going to run it on main. Since it's the first time I'm running it and I'm not doing the daemon, it's going to be a little bit slow. It helps all of you appreciate how fast PyCharm can be at type analysis. Am I right?
The other thing is that in most cases, if MyPy was going to fail, PyCharm will also detect the errors and will show the red squiggly lines. So by the fact that we don't have red squiggly lines, we know that.
Sure.
Most of everything.
Okay, so I'll run it on test under main as well. And I'm not really running it in strict mode. If I was running in strict mode, it would have gotten mad about not having a return type on the function here. But it goes to show that without having to, Sebastian, I don't think there was any special MyPy stuff you needed for this level of static analysis. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, like when there was a decision to make something that would require some type of plugin or something like that, I changed the design to make it work well with MyPy so that it will work well with editors and with everything.
Has there ever been any talk about like any extensions to MyPy that you had to write to get any things?
I had to write extensions for MyPy at some point. It was actually for Think, the library that goes underneath Spacey, the natural language packet.
Okay.
But yeah, and like writing extensions for MyPy is not as simple and easy because it's not the development process for writing extensions is not very well documented. And then you have the support in the MyPy tools, but then you don't have auto-completion in PyCharm or VS Code or tools.
Sure. I'm going to actually, I'll stop there for a second. Alexei, how do you feel about the discussion about there are multiple type checkers out there? MyPy is one, Pyre is one, Google, Dropbox, Facebook, people have different type checkers. And we've had a type checker for Python for a very long time, open source. Do you feel like the state of type checking in the world of Python is consistent enough for this vision that Sebastian's having about smarter developer experience through tooling?
Well, yeah, I would say so, because while some things are supported here and not there, most of the important things are supported all across the type checkers. And Sebastian, by designing FastAPI this way, makes it type checker agnostic. So it should work across all the type checkers and provide the tooling support.
Yep. Do you have anything in chat that we needed to bring up?
People suggested, Christian Muller suggested reading the response model from the decorator about around the time you talked about type checking in your test lines. And that's a nice idea. That's something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, so I've got, what I did was I teleported us into the future, since we are unsurprisingly running comically out of time, to kind of the end point of Sebastian's tutorial for SQL model. And we'll talk about that for a second. But in particular, on what Alexei's discussing here is the response model. Sebastian, what's the purpose of the response model? I know the answer. I somewhat disagree.
The idea of the response model is to do data validation and data documentation and serialization on the output of on the response data. So by declaring here that this is a list of hero, and this is using the same syntax as we use for normal type annotations, we are telling FastAPI, hey, we are going to return a list of these instances of hero, which is this model that we created somewhere. Then FastAPI will do data filtering using this model. So for example, if the hero object had, for example, a password saved in the database, and we have some different model that we are returning, then it will filter using this model to not include the password or things like that. And it's also going to do data serialization, data conversion using this. So if we return an object that is just an instance of something from the database, FastAPI will use this class to extract the data and put it in the JSON contents. And it will be automatically included in the automatic documentation and OpenAPI.
And you can't do it here where you would expect to do it, because I suspect the decorator wraps it to mean that that's not actually the type.
The thing is that it will actually be possible. Like it's something that could be done, and it's one of those common questions. Why is it not there in the normal place?
There's a ticket.
yeah, and I think there are several people come back again and ask the same question again. But the thing is that here we are returning heroes, but let's say that we have a different model in the database that is hero with password or something like that. If we return heroes, and heroes is a list of heroes with password, and then we annotate the function as returning a list of heroes without password, then the tooling, MyPy, PyCharm, and other tools will complain, hey, you're returning something that is not a list of heroes without password. You're returning something that is a list of heroes with password. So that's the whole reason why that is there, because it's actually not one-to-one the thing that we are returning and the thing that we are declaring the response model, because FastAPI doesn't use it only for documentation. It uses it for data validation and serialization and data filtering.
Perfect. One point to bring up, Alexei just commented to me about this. In this project, the Endpoints tab is working. And what it does, this is one of the truly magical things that he added, kind of taking all that structure that you're expressing about endpoints and putting them into a developer experience, putting a GUI on it. So you get a listing of everything that Alexei thinks is an endpoint. And in this project, it's things with the app decorator, or you support the router decorator, right?
I support all the HTTP routing, like get, post options.
No, I mean, if you make an instance of router.
Oh yeah, API routers will be included as well.
API router, yeah.
Nice, that's super cool.
And I can go to these and I can see the listing of everything that I've got in this project. I can go get documentation. I can look and say, hey, wait a second, that thing doesn't have a doc string. So I will add a doc string in the magical REST syntax. And then when I come back to it and fetch documentation, I see that. I see all the type information. I can walk up to these, and if I don't want to manage a separate HTTP file for all of these, if I want them to be closer to the actual endpoint, I can do the Postman style REST requests while sitting on the endpoint. And that's actually pretty useful, associated with each other. And so this listing of endpoints is visualizing all those connection kinds of things that he's doing behind the scenes, so that these things start to look like structure, start to look like symbols. I've teleported us, and I'll do this in the last couple of minutes. I saw a question over here about Django. Sebastian, I suspect somebody could run FastAPI and Django in the same process as different ASCII mount points. With Django doing async now, presumably you could run Django under Uvicorn. You ever done anything?
So yeah, like actually the ASCII specification came from Django for the channels project. So the recent versions can work like that. But you can also mount a WSGI application like Django or Flask inside of FastAPI, and it will run under like some specific endpoint or something like that. So you could, for example, mount Flask with Flask admin or something inside of the same FastAPI application.
That's going to be interesting to see how people mix and match those things, and then find out places where the SQL Alchemy engine gets really mad about that. All right, so I've teleported to the end of the SQL model demo, and so I don't have time, unfortunately, to talk about SQL model. But the basic idea is before you would, in FastAPI, you would write your models in Pydantic, and then you would have to write them again in SQL Alchemy. Sebastian, is that correct?
Yep. If you were using SQL Alchemy for databases, that will be the most common use case.
Yep, which is one model too many. Wouldn't it be great, Sebastian from 4 months ago thought, if I could just do some really deep voodoo in SQL Alchemy and Pydantic, both of which are little islands of their own voodoo. And I don't know if this is arithmetic or exponential, but the voodoo quotient had to have gotten out of control. And he set it up so that you can write a very Pydantic looking thingy that also has some database thingies in it as well. One model to rule them all, and it will generate tables and all that SQL Alchemy stuff for you. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, that's a great summary.
I'll poke at the PyCharm guy a little bit. I did this yesterday, so he knows it's coming. For those of you out in Python land, you might be like, huh, what's that keyword argument doing where my superclasses are usually located? That's not possible, is it? In fact, it is. It's a dunder init subclass kind of thing. And in the, let's see, I think I got to go to, is it in the superclass? Maybe it is. I'll wind up going and chasing. Yeah, no. Ugh. Where is the spot where you look for the those config arguments?
I think it's in the meta class, in the SQL model meta class.
The SQL model meta class. So, oh, this one. Yes, sorry. Yep, I was looking at the wrong thing. So this takes some of that information that was passed along in as extra arguments.
Yep, I actually don't know exactly the place where it is, but
I thought it was in a dunder init under subclass. Is it in the dunder under new?
I don't know if it's in the Thunder New or the Thunder
Okay.
Init. I think it's in the Thunder New.
So there's a place where you define these things that have arguments and you can pass them at this level. We, unfortunately, can't sniff that far back and help you. But Alexei knows about it, and that's something that we could provide a little bit of structure and type completion to. So on to finishing up with SQL model, we have something that we call from our main.py, and we call it during the startup event, and that goes and creates, I put this thing in to check if it exists, otherwise create some data, but we create an engine and we set it up with SQL Alchemy. And then I add a couple of heroes to it and commit. And then from that point forward, my API endpoints are going to say, for reading heroes, they're going to get a list of all the heroes. Looks very SQL Alchemy. And these are actually wrapper ones, not the, these are from SQL model, not from the underlying SQL Alchemy. And then the pattern that Sebastian did in his tutorial that I thought was great was, rather than every one of these having to make a session as a context manager and do all that kind of stuff, he made a dependency on something that would go and make a session for you and then yield to you for doing all of your statements. And so the context manager is put in one place. It also makes it easier to write tests. Last thing for the day before getting comments from the two of you on this bigger one. Over in the tests, I really love his pattern in the tutorial of creating fixtures to set up the session, set up the client, and never have an actual database on disk that's being used. Instead, use the in-memory version of SQLite so that my tests don't really have to worry as much about overriding the production database or whatever it is that they're currently running on. So lots of great information in the SQL model tutorial. I will stop there and we'll get some comments before going into the wrap up. Alexei, did you see anything over in chat for us to talk about?
There's a question for Sebastian. Is it possible to use depends in the startup event?
Not currently. It's something that I have on the plans to be able to use depends on the startup events and middleware, but not currently, not yet.
So that's what's being discussed.
Yeah.
There's also a question, what about NoSQL like MongoDB?
So if you are using something like MongoDB, you can use a tool like Automatic, I think is the name. The other one is Beanie. There are two libraries to connect with MongoDB based on Pydantic, and because it's very similar as SQL model. The idea is that you create a single model and it can be used to interact with MongoDB and at the same time to declare the shapes of the data for the inputs and outputs of the APIs.
And Jad asks if this is based on the Open API spec. I believe you've gone through multiple generations of increasing your Open API support. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that question was about the endpoints feature, but I'm pretty sure the endpoints feature is actually tightly integrated into the FastAPI code itself, right, Alexei?
Yeah, that's statically inferred from the FastAPI structure, from the structure of your FastAPI application.
So that one is extracted from the actual code, from the actual decorators and all the stuff.
Yeah, that's how it's implemented now, but we could reevaluate it for future implementations if we see that reading it from somewhere is better.
Yeah, like that will be, the thing is that reading from OpenAPI will mean that you will have to execute the code. And the whole idea of this is not having to execute the code and just being able to do it with static analysis. So I guess it could be done if you wanted to have a client that is independent of any framework or something like that. But that will be like a whole different project. For the FastAPI integration, this is the best way to approach it, I would think.
Yes.
I'll answer a question from not a question. Ricky Teacher was actually given the answer on this, but I'll demo it real quick. There was a question about PyCharm and fixtures and fixture names. If I go and put a typo here and come back, these won't be, or it'll autocomplete on that. So we actually go and sniff out this name protocol of that PyTest came up with for fixture names, and we go and find them, and then we'll autocomplete on them, and we will type infer the correct one. So
nice. That's very cool.
So we know that this is a session.
That's pretty cool.
All right, let's see. Okay. I believe that, yeah, yes, there is the question about the link to our PyCharm guide tutorials. So it's jetbrains.com PyCharm guide. And there's a list of some tutorials in here, and Mukul is coming up with, I think Mukul's in the channel, is working on the mother of all tutorials on FastAPI and AWS and Kubernetes.
Nice.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start the process of wrapping up. Before we get into the conclusion, Sebastian, what's next for FastAPI, SQL model, the whole chain?
Oh, a lot of things. Right now, I'm actually working on improving some of the ways that the async libraries work underneath. This is actually currently part of my work at Forethought to improve the way. The technical details is how sending code to be executed in a thread pool and making it compatible with context vars works, because currently it requires a lot of manual handling. So I want that to be easier to do. But what it will allow and what it will enable and what it will result in the end is some documentation in FastAPI about how to integrate async with non-async code in the same functions, in the same code bases, which will be super useful.
And if people want to get involved in either SQL model or FastAPI, what's the best way?
There's a whole section in the documentation about helping and getting help for FastAPI and SQL model. And for example, if you help others in FastAPI, then you might qualify to the FastAPI experts section. There's a section with the official FastAPI experts, and those are just the people that are helping others with their question and like are showing that they are experts because they know how to solve even other people's problems. So there are several ways to contribute. It's all documented there, and it's made in a way that should be easy for you to go ahead and help others.
Can they say on their CV that they've been using FastAPI for 10 years?
Well, I guess to be fair and to be comparable with the requests from recruiters, I guess.
Yes, from recruiters. I guess that's a way to disqualify the recruiter. Alexei, all these ideas that people might have, that I encourage them to come see you about ways to put the structure to work, weirdo ideas, which is my department. What's the best way for people to let us know what's a good developer experience?
Well, the best way I would say is our issue tracker. We have an open issue tracker. Anyone can create a ticket. So feel free to submit your suggestions for features. And if you see that someone has already suggested your idea, feel free to vote for it, because that's something that we monitor constantly. And if we see something getting traction, we make sure to take a look at it.
We actually, before every release, we do go through and look at votes and things like that. We actually do. Okay, so Sebastian, I got to give you a big thank you, not just for coming on here and talking with us, but everything that you do in the world of Python. Folks don't realize how emotionally exhausting it can be running a high-profile open source project. I think not Will, but Simon Wilson sent a screenshot today of the totally abusive way people treat open source creators who are giving stuff away for free. Just like, why haven't you solved my problem for me? Okay, sorry, I haven't solved your problem for you. So we are just so lucky to have you. And Alexei, thanks for bringing into PyCharm a number of the full stack thingies that I care so much about, and this whole idea of getting more structure out of things. So thanks to both of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Paul, Alexei, and PyCharm and JetBrains. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. It was awesome.
Thanks to you both.
If you'd like to get more information on PyCharm, got the slide on the screen, go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. If you haven't already, take a look at the blog. What can you find on the blog? Well, you can probably find an announcement about the recording of this pretty soon. And also news about releases. We're doing a lot of releases because we're getting into the finishing up the EAP cycle for 2021.3. as well as events, conferences, so that we go to, announcements for webinars, things like this, and other educational resources. We would really like feedback on this webinar. So feel free to contact us on Twitter. I'll probably be the one that sees it and replies. So be nice to me. No, seriously, say what you think. Also, we'll send out an after webinar survey. We read these things in great detail. Feel free to send them out or just drop me an email. Pretty easy to figure out my email address. That's all from us today. Thank you to our esteemed guests, plural, which was a lot of fun having both of you, as well as our esteemed viewers. Thank you for joining us. Have a nice day.